All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Excited to be with you as always. Got an interesting topic for you today. It has to do with Africa. And I did tell you guys last week that I was working on this because I wanted to confirm some information and also to put my analysis for you within the proper context, geopolitically speaking, mainly. So this is what I'm going to be addressing for you today, and what does it mean as the major global powers vie for influence and competition in Africa. It's a quiet competition that is taking place in on the continent. So before I'll do this, let me say hi to our community. As always, Willie Holman, good to see you. Phil, good to see you. Truth Seeker, good to see you as always. Taiwan Still. Hang G, and good evening to you. By the way, Hang, I read your comment about the disaster that took place in China. It's very heart touching, and given how China responded to that versus what we are seeing in California, you can just tell the difference. Guys, if you get a chance to read Hang NG's comment, I might post it for you in the community later on. So Taiwan Still, good to see you as always. Alice Talokin, good to see you. Francis Tango, as always, good to see you. Hi, Karakulak, good to see you. And Jonathan Foster, good to see you. Let me silence my phone so this way I won't get distracted by this, and we just can move on with what we're going to be talking about today. So anyway, excited to see you guys. Here are the questions that we're going to have to ask regarding this topic. First of all, the timing of the announcement for Senegal, Chad, and the Ivory Coast, or the La Côte d'Ivoire, the announcements of it. Very crucial timing. That's important. Second thing, is this mean that France is out but the US is in? I have a story about seeing the same pattern, and I'm going to take you back to early 90s, and I'll talk detail about that one. Third question is there a major powers wide competition, geopolitically speaking, on the continent? And the last question is, which is the key and crucial one, what will Africa do? Why am I saying this? I am saying in reference to the massive amount of corruption that exists in certain regimes. There's no, even in my own country here, we're not like the saint here. We are the leader, if I may use the term, in corruption, just in a subtle way. So, but it doesn't prevent us from asking the key question: what will Africa do that is now embarking on a new trajectory? And this is what I'm going to be addressing for you in this analysis. There is one event that is taking place. I wanted to share it with you. So, because the media is not going to cover this in detail, let me share a picture right here. The current demonstrations that's taking place in Romania. And of course, the protest comes a month after the Constitutional Court, made the unprecedented move to cancel the election just 2 days prior to December 8th, a runoff. Why is this important? It's because the far-right populist Kalin Gorsuko shocked many when he won the first round on November 24th. So after which the allegation of electoral violations and Russian interference emerged. You all know the playbook of what. This is important to understand this dynamics because, again, like I always say, the media is not going to disclose the truth about this one here. And I even got, I'm going to share this with you guys because you need to see. And that's the whole reason for this channel here. Bring you the truth that matters. Let me share a screen quickly here from, I got this on my X account. And so I'm going to share it with you. Just bear with me here, guys. All right, let me make this full screen here and I'm going to play it.
Universitate din Ron. Deci de la universitate, de la sensul giratoriu până la roman. Auziți poporul român. Au zis poporul român, mă. Universitate din Rwanda.
All right. So why am I sharing this with you? Because there are already some events taking place in Africa right now, vis-a-vis our topic we're going to be talking about. But there are already some groups launching attacks on villages. And those groups, some of them are linked to Boko Haram. To those who know who Boko Haram group is, you have to go back to ISIS. And if you know the history of ISIS, who created it, you can put the two and two together and figure it out. This is what I'm trying to sort of highlight to you in these arguments here. So as I said, I'm going to be talking about Senegal, Chad, and Ivory Coast that all the French troops to get out, leave from their territory. And the question that we all need to ask is, will the U.S. move in? There is already some movements by U.S. military presence in certain parts in Africa that is considering those locations. So, but in bigger picture, what all this means is that the French relationship with its colonies, basically in Africa, has come to an end. Of course, we saw this one here with the what was it? I have the map here, guys, for the Sahel region with the Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. We all remember the presence of France was very, very, very wide there. It's been almost for a while. So, and that begs the question for not the question, but rather thinking in terms, this era has come to an end, but is this paving the way for the US? We can also think outside the box by saying, did the US play a role into these developments? In other words, did the US push behind closed doors for those governments, the likes of Chad, the likes of Senegal, the likes of Ivory Coast, to push for this, paving the way for the US entrance? I won't be surprised. I've been in Ivory Coast when I was in the government, so I kind of understand this dynamics, how it works. So, and this is where, again, you need to think in those terms as to whether the US is going to be replacing France. And if it does, that is a big problem. Why? Because I'm going to bring you to 1993 to be exact. What happened? A major event took place in Africa in 1993 between two tribes. If anybody can tell me what I'm referring to without giving away. Just go back, 1993, right after Bill Clinton took over. Some event, major event happened in Africa. And let me remove those questions here. There we go. Oh, you got it. Multi-Tom, you got it. Tutsi and the Hutsus. Right there, you got it. Indeed. But why this is important, that's going to pave the way for you to understand it's almost what took place then. We're going to be seeing it coming in. Because once the French moved out, the US moved in. And when the US moved in, things changed, for example, with the currency, with the language, and you know the rest. This is what my fear for what might lie ahead. And the reason why I asked the question, what will Africa do moving forward? And I'm going to be sharing a few more things with you about this one here. But the idea is that the withdrawal, because we will consider it as a green light, you know, because is this now a green light for Africa that is given to the United States, which currently, as I mentioned, the US has some military presence in Francophone Africa under the banner, of counterterrorism. The same thing France was doing under partnership, when in reality it was none of that. France was taking advantage of the natural resources of those countries in Africa. So the US is not going to be any different, except that the US now is saying, you know what the US is saying is, we're going to rebuild Africa with infrastructure. Come on. If you are to do this, meaning for my country, they could have done it for Iraq. And second, without thinking about Iraq, you could have at least rebuilt right here at home. I mean, look again what's going on in California. I read a comment yesterday by Jesus Aguilar. He's one of an avid supporter of the channel who lives in LA. And he disclosed exactly what's taking place over there. Shame on our country that we send in billions over to other countries and we couldn't even take care of. Even now, this fire is suspicious. I'll let you reach that conclusion yourself. So, I was thinking about doing geography here for all three countries, but very, very brief, just a picture and some highlights to sort of provide you the insights that will allow you to place this development within the proper context. So I'm going to start with Senegal first. I'm going to share the map with you. Then we'll just go from there. All right, Senegal. Let me share the screen. And I give credit to World Atlas as always. All right, here is Senegal. Let me make the map bigger. Oh, it is bigger. So you guys can see over there. So Senegal is a West African nation, of course, located in the northern and western hemispheres of the earth. It is bordered by 4 countries: Mauritania, Mali, Guinea, and Guinea-Bissau to the north, east, southeast, and southwest, respectively, meaning with each country, that's where it borders. So the country is also bordered by the Atlantic Ocean to the west. Senegal nearly surrounds the small country of Gambia. Now, here is the key that I need you, and I decided to do it this way this time by just sharing this and sharing with you about the natural resources of each country I'm going to be talking about. So when you think about Senegal, the first thing that comes to mind is minerals. Senegal has a variety of mineral resources that includes phosphates, iron ore, gold, titanium, zircon, copper, chromium, nickel, and uranium. So the country's phosphate industry is a major part of its economy. And Senegal has a large deposits and reserves of gold. Senegal has also oil and gas. Senegal has petroleum deposits off the coast of Casamance and large offshore natural gas reserves. So this is why it's very, very important to understand those kind of the geography, but also the natural resources. So now let me share with you the next country, which is Chad. The country of Chad. Let me put this on the screen, share it with you guys on the screen. Then I'll provide you the same, just a brief description of the geography and so forth. Let me make sure you guys see this clearly. Okay, Chad. Chad is the North Central African country of Chad, lies in the northern and eastern hemispheres of the earth. It is a landlocked country that shares its land boundaries with 6 countries. And those 6 countries are Libya, Sudan, the Central African Republic to the north, east, and south, respectively. It is also bordered by Cameroon and Nigeria to the southwest and Niger to the west. Here is the kicker as far as the natural resources. Chad has oil. Chad's most important resource and export, which began production in 2003. Then you have natron, which is a complex sodium carbonate, which found in a Lake Chad and Borco area. Then you have gold, an emerging sector with about $137 million exported in 2018. And lastly, they have uranium. Chad has minerals deposits of uranium. Very, very interesting to understand about this country here. The third one is the country of Ivory Coast, or La Côte d'Ivoire, as they call it in French. Let me share a screen. And as I mentioned, guys, I spent some time there back when I was still in Washington for some events for the government there, of course. All right, Ivory Coast. Why is this important? Well, Ivory Coast, first of all, located in West Africa, and it is in the western and northern hemispheres of the earth. It is bordered by 5 countries. These are Guinea and Mali to the northwest, Liberia to the west, Burkina Faso to the northeast, and Ghana to the east. It has also a coastline on the Gulf of Guinea to the south. Ivory Coast, or La Côte d'Ivoire, has many natural resources that includes gold, diamond, nickel, manganese, cobalt, copper, and coltan. So the country's largest gold deposits was discovered in the West in 2024, meaning last year. Now makes you just think, why all of a sudden have it announced for the French to leave and might allow the US to get in? So very, very interesting. Now, when you look at those countries, I'm going to share the map again of the Sahel region, because here they are. Just look at the entire Sahel region from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to Eritrea and the Red Sea. And look where those countries are located. Here is Senegal on the left side of the screen, right where you see. Here is Chad right there on the right side of Niger, okay? And Ivory Coast is all the way down right here at the bottom near the Ghana. So this is why it's important for you guys to understand these dynamics, because it will make more sense to you. All right, let me get off here and move on into our analysis here. So the idea that this country is now following the patterns of the Sahel state. You all remember Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso decided to form an alliance, all 3, because they wanted to get out of the ECOWAS. You all remember that saga of the ECOWAS, and I did a video for you about it. So just go back, check it out if you are interested in learning. And the ECOWAS at that time was pushed by France and somehow by the US behind closed doors, that they're going to invade Niger and Mali, but they couldn't do it, because they know the Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso will fight back. So what they end up doing, they end up, meaning those 3 countries, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. I have a picture of their leaders right here. I'm going to share it with you guys. Right here, there's 3. They under this Ibrahim Traore, I remember him. So they all decided to form the alliance. Now, there is one thing that's going to be missing from all this. They can talk all they want till they form some major power in the sense of militarily speaking. This way, the likes of ECOWAS won't think. And why they will be in a position to do this? Because they are rich in uranium. What is uranium for? You all know. This is what I see. There might be the shortcomings for them because they need to develop on this. Now, I had a chance to read an analysis by the Global Intelligence Research. And I'm going to post a link for you guys. The Global Research, I'm sorry. I'm going to put a link for you about this very interesting article and analysis that is, and exactly addresses this. The author of it was someone by the name Ayabomi Azikiwe. So, and this is where he argued, will the Francophone Africa be taken over by the United States? Only if Africa allows it. And again, you know, with the corruption, it's so easy. So, and I couldn't agree more with the author, Abayomi, that it is understood that the withdrawal of the French troops from the Francophone Africa constitute a green light to the United States. And to me, I'll go further and say, I think the US played a role into pushing these sentiments against French so the US can have the upper hand in taking over. And of course, if the US does, it's going to be under the banner of counterterrorism. Already, now I just read this morning that in which country was it? I think the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. There were some groups of about 40 farmers were killed in Nigeria's Borno state. And those what those armed groups have done. And those are affiliated with ISIS. Now again, think again. How did ISIS emerge in Africa? How did even Boko Haram emerge in Africa? You all remember Somalia. You all remember all that. So, and you're smart enough to read between the lines and understand where this is headed. So, and it's going to be under that banner of, oh, we are here to defend you. Counterterrorism, that is. So, now, there is another key point that I believe the article addressed, and I couldn't agree more. The withdrawal of France not only points to the dollarization of Francophone Africa, it also suggests that eventually for France, it will impact it in more than just access to natural resources or the language. Or you think, for example, Algeria right now. Algeria decided to cancel French language from its schools, and they're going to they already embarked on using English. I'm not saying, but you have, because I don't see Algeria allowing the US in anyway. But that doesn't mean meaning Algerians, won't be smart in using the language that can at least help. Morocco is doing the same. My last visit, I got a word that they are considering now embarking on using English. Well, it's about time, because the whole system in Morocco, the administrative, is not only corrupted, which I don't shy away from saying, because there is corruption in Morocco, and I hope and I wish the king can come down hard on those corrupted, including the prime minister. So when you have the representative of the government as corrupt as he can get, that sends a message to the rest of the society. But again, that's their country. They can decide whatever. The question is, they are moving from French into English. So the same arguments can be made about here. Are those countries in Africa now that kicked France out are only going to open the door for the Americans because of the language, or the US is going to sink in its claws into those countries? Because once they are transformed into an English speaking, I feel comfortable saying, please correct me and say, please respond, yes or no. Will I be wrong? Will I be wrong if I say once the US sank in its claws in those African countries, they're going to be the English-speaking US colonies in Africa or Central Africa, because that's where those countries are? Let me just see in the chat box. Will I be wrong in that assessment? Yes or no? Phil, I say English is the language of commerce. Yeah, they can take advantage of it. But the idea, truth seeker, you say no. Mohammed Mazhar, you say no. Hank, you say no. And Jongelia Jones, you say no. And I see your point, guys, because that's how I see it. That is how I see it. Once it is, it will become. I could see the same argument I can say about Philippines right now. I can see the same argument about Japan, South Korea, Australia, Germany, even Italy to a degree. So it will be no different. So, and this is where this analysis that I read by author Abayomi, very, very spot on. Why? Because he brings in also the old history of Rwanda. We all remember what happened in Rwanda. So the interesting aspects of this, because when you think about what took place in Rwanda between the Tutsi and the Hutsus, and by the way, I'm going to share a quick story with you here about Rwanda. When I got my PhD, during the graduation ceremony, the guest speaker, which I didn't know till he was start to speak at that time, I was very touched because the individual was the owner of a hotel in Rwanda. You all remember the movie Hotel Rwanda? Well, I got a chance to listen to the real owner of that hotel and how he kind of helped people escape from the massacre because they were using machetes and killing babies, older people, you name it. It was a heartbroken event that took place. That's no different than what's taking place right now in Gaza, I'll say. But what we did back then, we decided to stand on the sideline just watching, because Bill Clinton at that time refused to send U.S. troops to prevent the jump. We let it go by design. And I remember it used to be a Canadian general by the name General Dallaire. Just look at the public record. General Dallaire, because he was there, he ended up having a mental breakdown when he came back to Canada or returned to Canada. He had to check into a facility. He had a breakdown because of the horrors that he saw. And where was the Western world? They all took the sideline watching in. The same that we are witnessing right now in Gaza, no different. So where is this Western ideologies and rule of law and so forth? As a matter of fact, some of them are contributing to that. Let's just, and by the way, it's not just the West, it's the Arab and the Muslim world that they are also taking part of that. Yeah, don't be misled by thinking, oh, it's the West fault. Of course, the West bears some responsibility, but also the Muslim and the Arab world, because Arabs and Muslims tend to just talk. Look what the Jordanians are doing, the Saudis, the Emirati, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, you name it. Egypt, Tunisia to a degree, Morocco, Algeria still, I do not know where it stands, but they did express their frustrations regarding one. Expressing frustration versus taking action are two separate things. So, but that's a different topic for another time. This one here is to highlight to you that once English has become the official language in Rwanda at that time, alongside French, by the way, they were both existed in Rwanda after. French political and cultural influence was eventually erased. So, which means what? That means Washington became the new colonial master of a Francophone country. This is what you need to understand. The same arguments I can make right now about, I'm going to share the map again for the Sahel, right here. All of those are French-speaking countries, including when you look up right here for Algeria, Morocco, those two countries at least. So when you think about the several Francophone countries in the Sahel or sub-Saharan Africa, so what did they end up doing? They end up entering into a military cooperation agreement. Yeah, that's what they end up doing. Agreement with whom? With France? No, it was the US. At this time, I was aware of the presence of NATO forces in Mauritania. What the heck is NATO forces doing in Mauritania? Well, we train in Mauritania's own security, because you all understand the conflict between Mauritania and Morocco regarding the Western Sahara stuff. So it's just pitting one entity against another, and that was exactly what took place in Rwanda back then. So this is why those three countries, Chad, Senegal, and Ivory Coast, there are some sort of slated now to follow the same pattern that Rwanda did. That's why I asked the question, the key question: what will Africa do now? So, and of course, if you think back then, what happened monetarily? The US dollar was rapidly displacing the CFA or the French franc at that time. So, and of course, The French franc that was in Rwanda, he was linked to none other than a board management arrangements, or to the French treasury, and this was argued by Michel Hodorowski back in 2000, all the way back then. So this is why you need to understand where these dynamics are headed. So, and of course, you got the two major languages in Rwanda, the French and the English. I can see the same pattern moving into Senegal, into Chad, and into Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast, because they speak French there. And I was there. That's exactly what we, when I was there, that's what we addressed in French language. So, and it becomes the question, I'm going to share pictures now of the presidents of those countries, because you need to, again, to understand who's in power, who's in charge here. And so the French president, Emmanuel Macron, which is like, the guy is not qualified. This is not the like of what France used to have, at least during the era of François Mitterrand, François Hollande to a degree, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing to a degree. But the likes of this guy, the likes of Sarkozy before him, those are not statesmen. Not at all. So let's start with the Senegal president. Is the youngest, by the way, in the continent. So his name is Bassirou Diomaye Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye. So known commonly as Diomaye. So he's like his background. He used to be a tax official. He deals with taxes and so forth. And this is why he's serving as the 5th and current president of the Senegal. He's the youngest, by the way. Very, 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 very young. So it depends how he's going to move forward. Then you have Chad president. His name is Mohamed Deby. Now, his dad was a president. So Mohamed Idris Deby, or Mohamed Idris Deby Itnu, that's his name, or Intu. So he was some sort of a general in the military, and his dad was a president, of course, during the Transitional Military Council. That's when he took over, when his dad died. And by the way, his nickname is Kaka. That's how he is known. So now he gained power. This guy, Mohamed Idris, gained power in 2021, succeeding his father, Idris Deby, who died in action while commanding troops in northern Chad offensive. At that time, it was a major. I was aware of that one. So that's another picture of his right here. So then you have the Ivory Coast president, Alassane. His name is Alassane Ouattara. So he's the Ivory. He's been serving since 2010. As a matter of fact, they have to change the constitution. This is where corruption comes in. Why the heck will they change again, it's their country. Who am I to criticize them? I'm not criticizing. I'm just providing the fact. They used to have 2 terms. Okay? 2 terms for president in the new 2016 constitution of the Ivory Coast. And this limit was lifted by none other than this president, Alassane Ouattara, allowing him to run for the 3rd and a 4th terms. There are those who say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Ivory Coast or La Côte d'Ivoire cannot be trusted. I would say the same about, what's his name, the guy from Cameroon. We invited him to the White House to get the marching order. So here is a picture of him with François Mitterrand. With Emmanuel Macron during his visit last year in October 2024. And I give credit, by the way, the picture to Ludovic Marin. That's his picture. So another picture again. This is when what's his Macron. I'm drawing blank, guys. He went to visit with the troops to celebrate his 44th or 42nd birthday, whatever, in the military base in Chad. That's what it was. And here is a picture of the demonstrations that's taking place, asking for the French army to leave. That was what was, this was, by the way, this is from Niger in 2023. This is where the picture is from. So. And this one is the departure of the French. They start packing and moving forward. So now I'm going to get into the, when you think about this Ivory Coast, for example, joining now the campaign to expel French forces, yet they said they want still maintain diplomatic relations. Well, it's not, doesn't bode well for France, right? Of course, because France gets most of energy sources or resources from Africa. Do you guys know the uranium that France uses for its nuclear power plants are coming from Africa? And they sell them on the international markets. To my knowledge, the last time I checked, about a year and a half ago, it was sold for about $200 a pound. And they were paying African countries about $8 a pound for that. That was a year and a half ago. The numbers could change, of course, but that was to my knowledge back then. So now, because Ivory Coast was a colony of France, of course, till they get the independence in 1960s, but it's still, after that, even with that, they still remain. France's presence in La Côte d'Ivoire was very, very, very heavy as part of what it used to be. So now, when they say that, well, it's just diplomatic, we're going to maintain diplomatic. No. It's to the benefit of the US that the La Côte d'Ivoire embraces the presence of the US, which I can highly suggest for African countries not to do so. So it's not about, I criticize my country when criticism is due. Simple as that. I know someone put a comment, I read comments, and somebody who wrote some really not appropriate, but I kind of understand the person was hard. It was hard for the person to read the truth. You know, it's my country. I'll fight for my country, but at the same time, I will criticize my country when it does wrong. And my country has been doing wrong for a long time. So I can highly advise African countries to rethink. So now comes the elephant in the room, and that is the economic and geopolitical angle, represented by two countries only, and two only. What are those countries are, guys? Two countries. When you think of geopolitical aspect and the economic aspect in Africa, only two countries that matter. Which ones? We're talking global powers here. Let me see. Alistalokin, US and China. No, not the US. Not the US. No. I will go with Mohammed Mazhardin, Russia and China. You have to think about that aspect, because US presence has been neglected. We neglected Africa for so long. We didn't care. When did we start caring about Africa? It's when China and Russia start to expand their presence into all that. So let me start with the economics with you briefly here. I'll give you an example about China. China has invested about $51 billion, and this is in fresh funding, which, by the way, will promise millions of jobs for Africans. Because if you want to help Africans, you don't give them handouts. You create opportunities for them to work. This is exactly what China's not doing charity, by the way. Let me just put that on the record. China's investing for its own interest. And rightly so. The same thing we are doing in other countries, or we did after World War II. China is doing the same. So when you think about China has invested already billions of dollars in infrastructure projects across Africa, that includes roads, dams, airports, railways, you name it. And these projects are part of the BRI. So, because you all know BRI to create the roots between China and the rest of the world. Do you blame them for that? I don't think so. So the US, now by going into Africa, this is why the US want to counter China's projects. And here is what the US just stated, and I'll provide you the link later on in the description. US plans to build Africa's infrastructure, bring opportunities and challenges. So, yeah, the question becomes is, can you trust the Americans? So, and this is why when what's his name, Tony Blinken, went over to Africa a couple times, as a matter of fact, last year saw major trips by U.S. officials. It's not like they care for Africa. No, because they wanted to counter China's projects there. And this is why when Tony Blinken went there to Africa in late January, many of his talking points were familiar. Listen carefully. And I'm going to quote this, including a focus on, in quote, threats to security and democracy, particularly in the coup-ridden Sahel region. Less predictable was a seemingly expansion from a security and health engagement to include trade, industrialization, and infrastructure. End of quote. You all know what it means. So take a look at this here. Just take a look. The countries where ports with major Chinese investments were invested. Those ones, they have the anchor. You see those countries right here on the coast here of the Atlantic Ocean. Here in around Kenya area, this is in Djibouti. And I was on that base and I saw the Chinese presence. Very small, it's not a major one. So look also what the countries with Chinese-backed power stations. Even Morocco is included right here in the north on the map. So, and also you have to think about the potential sites for a new naval base. And you see where they are located, right onto the access to the water. So Chinese are thinking ahead. So here is another example of a nuclear power plant that China built in Zimbabwe. This is a thermal, what they call a thermal power station. It's called Zhang Biaoping. That's the picture, belongs to Zhang Boping. So I give credit here. Yeah, what did we build for Africa? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, truth matters. You can't be sugarcoating this kind of stuff. So I'm going to get into that picture soon. So, because this is what I need you to understand about why all of a sudden the US is interested in Africa. And I feel comfortable saying that the US was behind the push, behind closed doors of those countries to kick France out. That paves the way for the US. And that, to me, it's a big concern. If the leaders of those countries, we couldn't do it with Niger. We couldn't do it with those three guys right here. We couldn't do it with those. We end up doing it with the weaker ones. We couldn't do it with those. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. We couldn't do that because they said, no, we can maintain diplomatic relationships with you, and that's where it ends. Because they know. But for those leaders here, I'm not going to jump to conclusions till I see how things evolve. But for Senegal, for Chad, and for La Côte d'Ivoire or Ivory Coast, I have to wait and see. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions right away because it's very, very important to understand this. The second country has to do with Russia, of course. While Russia has arguably expanded its presence and influence in Africa. It didn't happen last year or the year before. It was way before. Even when I went to Africa back then, when I went to Djibouti, when I went to Ivory Coast, we were aware of the presence of the Russians. So, and this is now is expanding. Just look at this map here, guys. And where is it? Sorry. When you look at this map, you look at the Russian presence was mainly in the central areas right here, including some parts in the south. But now Russia is thinking north. And when I say north, it's in a reference to Algeria and a reference to already in Libya. So this is where our concern. So these engagements by the Russians extend from deepening ties with North Africa as well. And it's go all the way to reach Central African Republic and the Sahel. And basically, what does it all mean? It means that Russia's aim at sort of going back to the relationship that was during the Cold War, because those regions or those countries were part of the Soviet bloc. So this is and you all remember when Russia hosted the African Summit. So this is Ibrahim Traore. This is the Ivory Coast president looking in. So this is what's important for you to understand these dynamics, guys, because it makes sense for you to understand the quiet conflict, if I may. It's a Cold War style, if I may use the term, that the US has been engaged in Africa with both Russia and China. Both Russia and China are not competing. This is what's the key important. They're not competing. They are working independently. Russia is focusing on the military aspects, while China is focusing on the economy and ventures. And both are serving their interests. So the US now wants to have access to just look at this map again, where all the presence of the investments that China did. And this is why we can, what we're trying to do in Africa is not going to succeed unless there's only one condition. And that condition is if the African leaders are bought. Simple as that. Really simple as that. I think, in my opinion, it's now or never. And I said this last year. I said the same thing. I remember. It's now or never for Africa to stand on its feet, on its own. Kicking out the imperialists first. Get rid of that. Restructure your own economy. Get assistance from countries who are willing to contribute. They're not going to give it to you for free. There is nothing free. But at least countries that's not going to keep you down, because that's what we did. That's what France did in Africa all those years. All those countries that I talked about, they all gained independence in the 1960s. So with Morocco and Algeria, I think 56 or so, somewhere around that time. But look, where are they as far as developments and so forth? Why? Because France never wanted those countries to evolve, economically speaking. And here's a history coming in a full circle, an opportunity for Africa now to really claim or reclaim its own identity. But till you get rid of corruption is going to be the key aspects that they need to deal with. So otherwise, it will be like we say, pouring water over sand. That's all it's going to be. Take advantage of this historical moment, Africa, because Africa has the key ingredients, natural resources and the manpower. When you look at the colonialism from Belgium to Portugal to Spain to France to Germany to the Dutch to the British, what have they done for Africa? Excuse me. You know, you'll be the judge of that because you are aware of the history. You know, and I have some viewers from Africa here that follows the channel regularly. And please, if you are watching here, please share your comments where you are as far as where do you see things are moving forward. The one thing that I am convinced about is that for those countries in Africa, and it doesn't matter what part, they're going to have to really make a hard decision once for all, because the global order is changing, or global order has changed. And speaking of that, I will be releasing a video for you guys that I composed an analysis for what I expect in this year, 2025. Something is worth for you to listen to. You might think geopolitics is, has not. It does. It will impact you. And you'll be better informed than not. You'll be better equipped with information than not. Because this way you won't be the average Joe that just going with whatever the herd is going. You go wherever you want to go. You go according to your understanding. So I prepared that. My editor already took care of that. And I am going to share it with you soon. I'll say the same thing about Africa. Africa needs to take advantage of this moment. Because by the time Trump comes in, do you think Trump's going to care for Africa? No offense to Mr. Trump, but no American president, no American administration ever cared for Africa. Simple as that. We use them. Because that was the mindset of how the collective West has always looked at Africa. And with its massive natural resources, why don't you hook up with a country that can help you? Of course, they're going to have to pay for it. They're going to have to give something in return. They're going to have what have you. That's like what happened with Morocco. I just was made aware of a major development between Morocco and China regarding the use of Huawei technology in Morocco. Only 2 or 3 years ago, Morocco shut the door on China when China extended its infrastructure, knowledge, and so forth to expand the city of Tangier. But the Moroccan government said no. The king said no at the time. He said no, not because he wants to, because the pressure from the US. All of a sudden now, they are realizing where the trend is headed. So why didn't Morocco think about this? Why did other countries think about this? And this is why the US is getting involved. The US is not getting involved because we care for Africa. Getting involved because we want to have a piece of the pie at any cost. And why should we have a piece of the pie if we are not invited? Look at, for example, Egypt, as corrupted as it gets, because Egypt is a corrupted government. That's his picture. This is Fattah Sisi. How did he came to power? We the one paved the way for him. The US and the Saudis gave the green light for the coup to take place. You all know the history. Maybe if one day you guys want me to do a live stream about how really he came to power and why. So I'll be happy to do it. So, and this is what I needed to share with you guys to understand those dynamics for where Africa is headed. The changes on the global stage are in favor of Africa if Africa plays its strategic cards the right way. Once again, they have the key ingredients: natural resources and manpower. It's a young, vibrant population in Africa. And that's why China went ahead with the projects that it did as far as investments of $51 billion that will create jobs in Africa. So it's no different than what the Chinese did in other countries like Laos when they helped build the speed train, like the Thai speed train also. So anyway, this is what I have to share. I think I'm concluding here. Please, before I forget, please subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. If you really care to support this channel, that's another way. If you can support the channel financially, which I understand some of you might not be in a position to do so. If you want to support the channel financially, here's the link for it. If you want to support just the channel, just subscribe. I would be grateful to your support. So Just to remind you, remember to join me on Friday at 1900 hours for my interview with Malu from Manila. It's going to be directly there, and also be on the lookout for my recorded vid that I'm going to release for you soon. I will also be on the big channel on Thursday for a live stream there, so make sure to join me. As always, guys, greatly appreciate your support, and thank you for keeping the chat in a civil manner here. I'm very grateful to you guys. It's a wonderful community we've built so far, and we all take responsibility in maintaining that. We all do. So it's not just for me; it's for you as well. All right, guys. I hope you'll find this very informative. And as always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.